Hey YouTube people, today we are taking a look at the Asus ROG Z13. Really cool device, and we're comparing it with the Surface Pro 8. Now, you would not be too far off to say that this thing seems inspired by the Surface Pro 8. In fact, if you kind of overlap them like this and look at the way that they open and fold and notch, they are almost clones of each other. The touchpads are the same size. However, what the Surface Pro 8 does not have is a discrete GPU. This is a 3050 Ti in here, which is going to give you, 2 to 3 times the performance of Intel Xe graphics, Shay graphics, whatever you want to call it. It also has some unique aesthetic that is pretty interesting. One thing that sticks out that I'll mention right off the bat that I don't like is this little window has a bump on it, which means if you try to set this down as a tablet on a desk, it kind of has a wobble. It's like, hey, we do that with phones. If we've got a thick chunk tablet like this, it's not a camera bump. This is not doing me any good. That's just me. But we're going to look at all sorts of different aspects of these devices, how they're different, how they're the same, how they compare. So here we go. Surface Pro 8 versus ROG Z13. Let's take a look. Okay, so we're going to take a look and see how well the pen functions. Now, the Surface Pro 8 has definitely been tuned for writing with its own pen. The ROG Flow has its own pen. It did not come in the box though, so we're using the Surface pen, which uses the same technology. You can see the vertical lines are okay. but it is not nearly as smooth. These red lines that I draw here really illustrate it. So I'm trying to go smooth and then thick at the top. So thin at the bottom, thick at the top, thin at the bottom, thick at the top. And you can see on the Surface Pro 8, I really can do that quite easily, and it feels very fluid. But on the ROG Z13, it becomes a little harder. This is the exact same application, by the way, so Microsoft Whiteboard. So it is not the best pen experience, although it could be improved with future firmware updates. And again, just to demonstrate this further, I'm going to do the same thing again, just to see if there was some sort of fluke here. But no, the Surface Pro 8 just glides, and the Z Flow, not so much. You're seeing some of that jitter on the edges, and not the greatest inking experience, so take it for what it's worth. Okay, so right here we're testing the brightness of both machines. You can see on the left the Surface Pro 8 can go very, very dim, which is really great in dark rooms or if you're using it in bed. It can also go very bright. This is not easy to do for a panel, and you can really see it demonstrated with the Z13. The Z13 is plenty bright. In fact, it's probably brighter than the Surface Pro 8. It also has a cooler temperature of screen. The Surface Pro 8 is actually fairly warm in comparison. It doesn't look warm when you look at it normally, but in comparison it looks pretty warm. And the Z13 really does not have much range in terms of the brightness that it can put out. So another thing to keep in mind. Now, while we are talking about the screens, I'm playing a full screen video to kind of demonstrate the difference between the panels. The panel on the right, the Z13, is really beautiful. We're also testing the sound here. This is the sound from the Surface Pro 8. The sound on the Surface Pro 8 is very, very good. It is, the only thing wrong with it is maybe it's too loud, even on the lowest levels. The Z13 sounds okay, but it's definitely not as good as the Surface Pro 8. Where the Z13 does exceed, though, is that panel. It looks nicer. It almost feels, you know, they're both set to 120, but the panel on the Z13, it's just bright, it's responsive, it's fluid, even though they're both 120. And I also like the color representation, although the Surface is probably a more natural representation and probably has is better for professional work. Okay, so now I'm just gonna quickly look at the backlight on these two devices. In a brightly lit room, the Surface Pro 8 is really not noticeable that it even has a backlight. I'm turning it up and down, and you really can't see it at all. However, you don't get any light bleed under the keys like you're seeing on the Z13, but the Z13 is quite bright. I have a purple color on there to match my background. It actually does RGB. It can be any color that you want. So don't get caught up on the fact that I'm showing it purple. And in fact, I'll turn on some rainbow here so you can see the whole gamut of colors that it can give off. It also can give off just a pure white glow if you don't want anything too distracting. So don't worry too much if you are anti-RGB. You can set it to just pure white and be fine. Okay, so let's just take a look real quick at the speed of the NVMe SSD, and you can see that the Z13 is much quicker. They're both very quick, but the Z13 does have a significant advantage, especially in writes. Okay, so this is going to be super interesting. We have the Z13 on the right and the Surface Pro 8 on the left. Now what I've done is I've disabled the GPU, the discrete GPU on the X13, and I have set both of these in the higher performance mode, and this is 11th gen, this is 12th gen. You can see that the package power on this is idling at 5.2 to 6, and the package power here is at 2.6. You also can see that the clock speed on this is usually staying ramped down. It seems to be more conservative for sure, which makes sense. This is a U 15 to 28 watt chip, where this 12900H is a little bit more higher powered. Now, what's going to be really interesting is what the graphics do in terms of wattage. I'm curious to see when we run the GPU stress how much package power it will pull, but also what the difference in frame rate will be with a basically uncapped processor. Because this Z13 without the discrete graphics turned on, it has a lot of thermal headroom. This is a thick boy, and it's going to work pretty well. So let's see what happens. Okay, and surprisingly, the Surface Pro 8 is actually going at 63 frames a second, 31 watts. The package power over here is at 35. I saw 40 for a minute. But yeah, 62 frames per second over here versus 47 on the right. Now that might be some tuning of that chip. I'm not entirely sure if there's a different number of execution units, which that could be the case. However, they're both pulling around, okay, this is like 32 on the left, and it's jumping between 32 to 40 on the right, but yet the Surface Pro 8 on iGPU has a higher frame rate. So that's really interesting result right there. Okay, yeah, so they both have 96 execution units, but for whatever reason, the Surface Pro 8 is tuned to push that iGPU a little bit higher. So 62 frames per second versus 50. We've kind of settled into 32 watts on the left and 28 on the right. So really interesting iGPU performance results here. Now, part of the issue might be this tends to keep its clock speed up. This is running at 4.4 gigahertz, sorry. Well, this is the CPU is at 1.7, which maybe the CPU is eating up all the power on this thing. So let's go ahead and turn this down to the performance mode and see if that makes a difference. No, it doesn't. It's still keeping that clock speed ramped up, where this lets the CPU dip in order to give more power to the GPU. So anyways, kind of cool. All right, so we've got some really cool devices here. The Z13 and the Surface Pro 8. Z13 in my book is like the Surface Pro Pro, or like the Surface gaming version or something like that, because it's very similar. They share a lot of the same form factors, touchpad, pen support, but where they do differ is in the details. For example, while this weighs almost a pound more, it really doesn't feel like it. I saw a lot of people were surprised with the weight, but maybe some of those people who reviewed it hadn't been carrying a Surface Pro 8 around, because it's fairly heavy too, but this is definitely quite a bit heavier, but it can still be easily used as a tablet, much more so than something like the X13 Flow, also an ROG Asus product, that is a convertible tablet. The fact that this is like a slate makes it just so much easier to use in that tablet form factor for drawing. But that's where some of the similarities start to fade. I didn't even test gaming performance between the two when using the discrete GPU, because it's absolutely no contest. The Z13 is going to blow it away with its 3050 Ti. But can it replace a Surface Pro 8 easily? Is it something that someone would want to upgrade? Well, that really depends, because the areas that the Z13 is better is the gaming performance, and the screen is not as prone to ghosting, brighter. They both have the same refresh rate, but it's got an aesthetic, some RGB bling, which is gonna make it attractive for some people, but it's also going to make it maybe not very attractive at all for maybe artistic or business people. I would not want to be rocking this in RGB rainbow colors while I'm taking notes at a business meeting. However, you can turn that off, so it's barely passable as a business tablet. You know, maybe no one would notice. You know, you just kind of like keep it tucked in your arm. No one would know that what it was capable of potentially. It's pretty loudly screaming gamer, but with the RGB off, it's just tiny bit more subtle. But let's talk about the Pro 8. Can it be replaced by this thing? There's a few ways that the Pro 8 is just way more refined than this thing as a tablet. The screen can go much dimmer, which you don't always want brightness blasting into your retinas. If you're drawing, this is definitely a much better device. You saw the pen strokes. The pen strokes on the Pro 8 are getting close to being top of the line. I know some people are hardcore Wacom people, but the Pro 8 is doing really well for itself, and people are getting used to it. I've noticed a lot of people who really like these things for drawing. The Z13 is just not going to give you that refined inking experience unless they tweak the firmware, or maybe their pen works better. I don't know, maybe it's been tuned with their pen, but from what I've seen, you saw me use the same pen across, it's the same pen technology. It's just not as good on the Z13. So while this still works for that, you can do notes, you can draw as much as you want. I mean, there's lots of digital artwork that doesn't require pen sensitivity necessarily. Some people use their pen differently. But it's definitely not nearly as good as the Pro 8 in that regard. Other interesting aspect of this thing was the Pro 8 actually had better iGPU performance. Now, I don't doubt that if I flipped a few more settings or played with some of the power controls that I maybe could have got that iGPU working. The thing is, who cares? You can turn on the 3050 Ti and you got as much performance as you want in this class of laptop. If you need even more, go for the XG Mobile. Now, the Surface Pro 8 can also take an eGPU, but only through Thunderbolt. This can also do Thunderbolt, although some people I've noticed are having issues with that eGPU in terms of keeping it powered while they're running that external GPU. Now, that remains to be seen. It's just early days. Well, there'll probably be some future videos that I have comparing maybe XG Mobile performance versus eGPU performance. But stay tuned for that. We'll see. So I think we've maybe covered it. Last thing, let's talk about the price. Now, the Z13 is, if you were just buying a gaming laptop with these specs, a 3050 Ti, the price would just be egregious. It's just way too high. And if you were just buying a tablet with pen functionality that was pretty heavy and chunky, you probably would not pay the price that this is either, because that would be egregious. However, all of that combined into one device, that's just how things go. The price being that high for something like this is partially due to the fact that, I mean, the form factor is brand new. There was a lot of retooling that had to be done to bring this to the market. It also has a lot of unique things on it to really make it perform. And in fact, this thing stays really cool to the touch even when it's running games. You know, even with the X13 Flow, I found that once it heated up, sometimes the performance would drop a little bit. Things wouldn't boost quite as high. This thing, you know, running benchmark after benchmark, stays cool, performance stays high, temperatures are well within check. The fact that it's lifted off and just basically sucks in clean air, spits out clean air right away from the tablet, it has a really well designed cooling system here. So it's very, very efficient when it comes to cooling. So I don't know, a lot of my fan base likes Surface devices. Can this replace it? I don't know. Is it going to replace it for me? I'm really not sure. I'm going to have to spend some more time with it. But the concept of having this much power and performance in a package that can do so much and is a form factor that I really like and have enjoyed over the years, the fact that you can just rip that keyboard off and use the tablet while you're sitting on the couch. You got the kickstand if you need it. I just love it. So whether you're going to spend some money on the Z13, I don't know, but it's definitely one of the coolest devices that is being launched this year. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it was not too long. Hope you enjoyed the comparison with the Surface Pro 8. If you enjoy this type of no-nonsense content, you know, go ahead and leave me a subscribe, a like, and we'll catch you on the next one. I do have the G14, the new 2022 version, on its way, should be here soon, and we'll take a look at it. Should be pretty exciting. So stay tuned, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.